I'm Steve Edwards, the Executive Director, and great to have you with us tonight for a conversation between Davis Guggenheim, who has spent much of the last 2 days engaging here at the University of Chicago with the Institute of Politics. We're grateful that you've spent time here over the last 24 hours or so in the midst of a film project he's working on. I won't give away all the details of that. Let Allison take care of that. And to have Allison here, who is a close personal friend and former colleague from WBEZ. So you're in for a real treat as the two of them talk about their work. And I think for all of us here at the Institute of Politics, when we think about politics and public policy and how to engage not only the students here at the university, but the broader public in the important issues of our time, we too often forget that the real power of connecting people to ideas in the civic space is often built around a narrative. And I think that Davis Guggenheim's work is proof positive of how a powerful narrative can drive much more attention to critical issues, among other things. So with that, we will turn things over in just a moment to Katie to give a formal introduction, but I wanted to remind you that we have all of our upcoming events on our website at politics.uchicago.edu. We also, as many of you know, record many of our public events, and you can go back and watch some of those by going to iTunes U and searching for us here. And Katie Wybazal is the person who will do the formal introduction of our program, and she's somebody who's been integral to the IOP in her first 2 years here at the University of Chicago. She's a second-year majoring in political science. She is a Fellows Ambassador, one of the founding members of our Women in Public Service leadership team. She's also an events ambassador, helping put on events like this. So please join me in welcoming her to the podium to formally introduce tonight's program. Katie, thanks so much.
Thank you. Thank you all for coming tonight. There's no doubt that art can make an impression on us. We all remember that movie, that play, or that song that left an indelible mark on our memories. But there's still debate over whether art plays a larger role in our society. Is it able to change policy or our beliefs? Tonight we are joined by award-winning director and producer Davis Guggenheim as we consider the power of art as a catalyst for change, and specifically the medium of documentary and the role it plays in bringing the world's most pressing issues to a global stage. Tonight he will share with us how he strives to make an impact on the public discourse through his work. Mr. Guggenheim is an acclaimed documentarian known for such films as Waiting for Superman, It Might Get Loud, and the Academy Award-winning An Inconvenient Truth. His latest project, He Named Me Malala, follows Pakistani activist Malala Yousufzai and her father Ziauddin, who fought against the Talibanization of their home. I am also honored to introduce for this evening our moderator. Allison Cuddy is the Associate Artistic Director of the Chicago Humanities Festival. You may recognize her voice from her decade-plus career at WBEZ Radio, where she created the popular arts and ideas talk show Odyssey and hosted the morning arts and culture news magazine 848. She is also on the advisory board of the Chicago Film Archive and The Moth, and currently hosts Strange Brews, which is a podcast about the culture and community around craft beer. Thank you so much for joining us tonight for this discussion of Mr. Guggenheim's life, work, and the impact of his art.
Thank you so much, Katie, and thank you, Steve. It's really wonderful to be here with all of you and in this beautiful space. I've never been to the Quadrangle Club before. Can you hear okay? Yeah? All right, well, it's very nice to be here with you as well. It's such a pleasure to meet you and to be able to talk about your very impactful work.
Thank you. When Katie said Mr. Guggenheim, I was looking for my father. I got really nervous. My father had come back from the dead. Yes.
I mean, that's an interesting place to start because you maybe didn't set out to, but you've ended up kind of following in the footsteps of your father, who was also an acclaimed documentary filmmaker. In a different kind of medium. I mean, you're more feature documentary, and he made a lot of documentary shorts, live action shorts, was nominated for, 11 Academy Awards, and won, I think, 4. And how did, did that end up happening? Was he someone that immediately kind of set your career path? Like, this is what I want to do, watching him work, or?
I grew up thinking that I would never be able to do what my father did. He was so cool in my eyes. I mean, no one really knew who he was, but he was this legend in my mind. And he made these great social justice documentaries. He made films about Bobby Kennedy and the Johnstown flood, about, you know, coal workers in West Virginia. It just was just this epic figure, the Ku Klux Klan, epic figure in my life. And when I graduated college, I decided that I would move to Hollywood and never, ever make documentaries. I drove west and I was like, that's him. I'm going to be a Hollywood director. And that didn't happen. So, you know, and I remember one other thing is I remember graduating, when I come here in this beautiful place and spend time with these students and Katie and the other ambassadors and the other students here. Amazing day talking to everybody. I just remember today for the first time being a senior at Brown in May and thinking, this is before I decided not to make documentaries, thinking that the documentary was over, that I'd missed the golden age of documentaries, that all the great ones had done their work, that all the opportunities were gone. Ken Burns was getting all the work, right? And done. So moving on. I'm moving to Hollywood. So,
was it Ken Burns in particular that made you feel like this is done? Nothing for me here.
I mean, Ken Burns was amazing. I mean, the Civil War. It was like, I forget when the Civil War series came out, but it was about that time. It just felt like there were no. I don't know. You feel hopeless when you're a senior in college. You think, well, there's nothing out there for me. It feels impossible. And all the people who are doing great things, it's like, that's not possible. And it is. It really is. Suddenly you're 50 and it's possible. So that's cool. And
you studied history at Brown?
So I studied film at NYU freshman year, and I hated it. And then I moved to Brown to do semiotics, which is a weird study of signs of signification, which was their form of film. And that was weird. And so then I moved into the history department. And you know, my father said, just learn how to write and learn how to read, and you'll make films by being intelligent or by being informed. And I think he was right.
Well, and about learning how to tell stories, right? I mean, studying history seems like a really great way to do that.
I think film schools teach people a lot, but they rarely teach storytelling. Some do. And my father always said, you know, it's storytelling, but I didn't know what that was. And, you know, so film schools are good at teaching theory, but they're often not good at teaching storytelling. And so I learned that in other places.
Well, I want to sort of jump ahead and maybe, spoiler alert, you head west for Hollywood, and you do end up having this amazing career. You work on some of the most interesting, sort of aesthetically, but also content-wise, television shows, both network TV shows and cable. You were on Deadwood for the first year of that series. You worked on Alias, 24, really innovative kind of TV programming. You go on to make a documentary, your first feature-length documentary, and it wins an Academy Award, An Inconvenient Truth.
Right.
But I want to jump to this moment and talk about some of the filmmaking you've done or storytelling you've done that is maybe most explicitly political or partisan.
Right.
And that's the work that you did for Barack Obama.
Which is why I'm here.
Which is why you're here, right? No, but okay, so here you are, you've got this incredible career and all kinds of acclaim, and then in 2008 or whenever you get the call, or I don't know if it was a call, but you get the opportunity to really, the gig of a lifetime, to introduce Barack Obama, who's running for president. If he wins, he will make history, the first African-American president of the United States. And your job is to introduce him to America.
Wow, that sounds like a lot of pressure.
Was it?
Well, I think all of us were pretty caught up at that moment, and I would have made coffee for, the people working for him. I would have done anything. And so when David Axelrod called me and said, would I do it? I said, absolutely. And it was, he called too late. Like everything in campaigns are too, so we made it in like 4 weeks, 5 weeks, which is really a short amount of time. And it played in a football stadium. I don't know if was anyone there in Denver? Yeah. It was like the most beautiful night, summer night in Colorado. The sun is just setting. It's like 60,000 people. And the movie plays, everyone's just quietly watching. And then it finishes and he goes on stage. It's like, come on. That's pretty awesome.
Right.
The truth is that the work that David did and the president did was the work. They had crafted a narrative and they had found a way to make this impossible candidate possible. Mm-hmm. I mean, even in the movie, the president jokes about his name being unviable. People would say, and especially after 9/11, people said, well, people told him to quit. And so the incredibly thoughtful work that David and his team did is really the work. And then I just sort of followed that and put pictures in front of it.
That's all.
No, I mean, that was a good gig, right? It's a good gig.
Well, let's take a look at a clip from a later film you made, and this was as part of the re-election campaign, The Road We've Traveled, which I imagine might have been a tougher gig.
So 4 years later, I think David asked me to do the convention film, or he didn't. I can't remember which. But something happened where it didn't work out. And I was taking my kids to school, and I got an email saying, sending a flare. That's all David sent me. Sending a flare. I was like, what does that mean? He says, call me now. So I call him, and he's like, what we tried didn't work. Can you please make the 2012 convention film in like 3 weeks? But wait, this is The Road We've Traveled.
The Road We've Traveled.
So I'm sorry, that's different. So this is kind of what we called an accomplishments movie, which is basically the first piece of media for the next election to sort of reintroduce people to him. And he was having a rough time. I don't know if you remember, but like in the second election, people were they were frustrated at the slowness of the recovery. Mm-hmm. They were frustrated with the political infighting and the sort of, and it was weird how we had sort of forgotten what had happened only 3 years earlier. And so that was sort of the premise behind this.
Well, let's take a look. It's about 3 minutes long, and this is from The Road We've Traveled.
Yeah. I need sound.
What do we remember in November of 2008?
Can you play it again louder? Yeah.
Just doing some technical. Oop.
Can you start? Yeah, start over. Can you start at the beginning? Yeah, thanks.
I think it's just the program. It takes a little bit to.
Yeah.
Here we go.
What do we remember in November of 2008? Was it this moment? or this.
This is an economy right now that can't find the bottom of bad news.
10 years of saving completely gone, vanished, poof.
Watching the Dow Industrial Average has been like watching the heart monitor on a critically ill patient.
How do we understand this president and his time in office? Do we look at the day's headlines, or do we remember what we as a country have been through?
The president-elect is here in Chicago, and he's named the members of the economic team, and they all fly in for the first big briefing on the economy. Many of the leading financial figures of the world are taking the subway in from the airport and traipsing through the snow to get to the transition office.
There was a screen set up for slides, but we might as well have been showing a horror movie, because what was described in that meeting was an economic crisis beyond anything anybody had imagined.
You had people telling you that the auto industry was literally days from collapse. The financial sector, kind of the heart that pumps blood into the economy, was frozen up in cardiac arrest.
The 6 months surrounding January 2009 is the worst 6 months ever that we ever had in the data. It was the biggest crash of household wealth that we've ever had in the United States.
Christy Romer, the incoming head of the Council of Economic Advisors, said, "Mr. President, this will be as deep as anything we've experienced since the Great Depression, and millions of people are going to lose their jobs." Tim Geithner, the incoming Treasury Secretary, said the financial system's locked up, and Mr. President, it could collapse. And then Peter Orszag, the budget director, was the cleanup hitter and said this is going to add trillions of dollars to our debt. All I was thinking at that moment was, could we get a recount?
Not since the days of Franklin Roosevelt had so much fallen on the shoulders of one president. And when he faced his country, who looked to him for answers, he would not dwell in blame or dreamy idealism.
Our time of standing pat, of protecting narrow interests and putting off unpleasant decisions, that time has surely passed. Starting today, we must begin again the work of remaking America.
As president, the tough decisions that he would make would not only determine the course of the nation, they'd reveal the character of the man. The first decision, where to begin.
So I was just thinking about this. I mean, obviously a tougher gig in the sense that it's not introducing Barack Obama anymore, or, you know, if the first film you made about him was kind of stitching him into the American story, or,
right.
You know, this one is about sort of trying to make him appealing again in a way, like having to restart that story. And so you brought in the big guns. You've got Tom Hanks narrating this, but what impression were you trying to create with this, and how much are you sculpting that narrative, or how much are you following a script? Like you said, you were kind of following the story that David and Barack Obama had set up.
In this case, it was more in my hands, I think. I mean, David and I confided in each other, and I think we both felt that people's memories are extremely short. I mean, I hadn't watched this since it played, and I'd forgotten. You know, you just, especially memory for bad events, it's just human, right? You don't want to, you want to sort of move, it's human nature. It's amazing how close we came to full financial collapse, and what days after or days before he's president, he's inheriting this huge bag of trouble. And so 3 years later, and about to be reelected, people are like criticizing for all these other things. And so it was like, hey guys, let's take a moment and let's look and see where we were and see, you know, what we would have done if we were president. And so it was a harder job for sure. And you didn't see this, but it ends with Bill Clinton saying, I hope that I had made the same call in terms of getting Osama bin Laden. So when you start to add up what he accomplished in those 3.5, 4 years, it's quite impressive.
Right.
So in the end, the record speaks for itself. But it's weird how in the news cycle, you're only remembered for what you did in the weeks or days before that. And I think that's what's great about movies is you can immerse yourself deeply into something. And so we had the opportunity for the first time to sort of take a look at his presidency.
Yeah, it's almost like a section from if you were to make a feature documentary about Barack Obama.
Yeah, that'd be a good movie.
Do you think about that?
Wouldn't that be a good gig? Yeah, so maybe.
Maybe.
Yeah.
We talked about your father earlier. I pin you down. Are you going to make a documentary about Barack Obama? When?
I'm available.
Okay.
So well,
if anyone wants to.
Who would? No.
I was thinking about, in terms of your work overall and where this fits within the other kind of work you've done. There's a quote from your father, and this is on Wikipedia, so I haven't been able to verify it.
Okay.
I don't know, but as you said, he also made movies, political advertisements, he called them.
Right.
The Kennedy film, which played at the DNC convention here in Chicago in 1968, which was a remembrance.
So he made a film after Robert Kennedy was shot, 1968, Chicago. 2008, Barack Obama is at his own convention, exactly 40 years later, and I'm doing the convention film. It was unbelievable. So.
Amazing.
I don't know, but what were you asking me? I'm sorry.
I was going to ask you, because he said he decided to stop making these kinds of films, and he said, if you play the piano in a house of ill repute, it doesn't matter how well you play the piano. Sort of deciding he didn't want to operate in politics anymore, or as a filmmaker. And I wonder how do you ever get that feeling? You were able to make films about some of the most, as you're saying, like uplifting, important moments in our political history.
My father started making films, political advertisements for Adlai Stevenson and other people, and then Bobby Kennedy when he was running for Senate, where they would make, this is really amazing, they would make 30-minute biofilms that would play on all 3 networks without commercial break. So you could tune in and learn about Bobby Kennedy for half an hour. And if you did that, you really could meet the guy. But what happened between there and when my father quit is that political advertising went to 30-second commercials because of laws, because of how expensive it got. And when it costs $500,000 or $1 million to run a 30-second spot on national television, you want to make that 30 seconds count. And you have a lot more surety of making a negative ad. It's much easier to slam the opponent and say something slanderous than it is to tell you something substantial. And so more and more as his job, as the business changed, he became disenchanted. And he didn't want to do negative advertising. And so he quit. This is different. And not only that, but this was such a special candidate. I wouldn't want to work in this next election. I have no desire to. None. I have a lot of skin in the game. I want certain people to win, and I really care who the next Supreme Court justices will be. But this is not a campaign I'm excited to work in.
Do you get approached a lot to make films like this on behalf of other candidates?
Never.
Never. Interesting.
Yeah.
Well, let's talk about another candidate that you worked with, former candidate.
Oh, yeah.
The man formerly known as the President of the United States.
He was President of the United States for about 7 minutes.
Yeah.
Declared by by CBS, I think.
So An Inconvenient Truth, which is this film that won you the Academy Award. And again, this was a film you were assigned, right? You were called and asked to make the film. Mm-hmm. And this is a film that came to be known as the PowerPoint film.
Right.
Right? Because this was this PowerPoint presentation that Al Gore had been doing since the late 80s.
Right.
Which is kind of incredible.
Right.
Going into this assignment, what were you thinking? Like,
I have two stories that sort of sheds it into proper light. One is, I was pitched the movie by the producers who had the idea, Lawrence Bender and Laurie David, and they said, we have a documentary about climate change with Vice President Al Gore, and it's about a slideshow. And I said, that is a really bad idea. Really bad idea. Like climate change, I'm there. Like that's a good idea. I care about that. But any politician, Gore was over here, and then a slideshow? I mean, really? Like, and they were smart. They said, well, he's giving it at a luncheon at the Hilton. So we went to the Hilton, and he's, he's doing the slideshow, and people are, like the waiters are standing in front of you, putting chicken in front of you. And I'm like, and here goes, CO2 levels have been 405 for the next 700 years. And I'm like, oh my God. It's like, when do I gotta go? And then by the end, I was just shaken to my core. Like the message in that slideshow was, and I was like, okay, I got to do this. I have no idea how I have to do this. Because in some respects, I think in almost every respect, I trust my gut more than I trust my head. And that's a hard thing to say at a university campus. But when I have a clever idea for a movie, it usually isn't that clever. When my gut is drawn in a good way or a bad way, it usually knows what's interesting. And I don't know how that works in what you guys are doing, but it works in mine. And there was some riddles to solve, because being in the room when someone gives a slideshow, you can go with it because Al Gore is right there and he's talking to you. And this is kind of interesting because I'm here talking to you. But if you saw a film of me doing it, it would be much less interesting because it's like I'm not even here. You could just walk away and make a sandwich, right? Because I'm just on a TV, right? So I was like, how do you do that? And so we interwove this personal narrative, finding a way to personalize the movie. And that's one of the things my father taught me. Was, I would say, well, we're going to make a movie about apartheid, I was really angry in college about South Africa. And he goes, well, what's the story? And I was like, well, it's this. And he goes, well, what's the personal story? And for him, that was one of the lessons he taught me, was that every good movie is personal. Because, people are interested in issues, but they care about people. They identify with people. I mean, it's clear what you guys do in political campaigns. And so we found a really odd way of personifying him by intercutting this slideshow with him. And we have a clip of that, right?
Yep, let's take a look.
I thought that was what I'm supposed to set up.
It was perfect.
I had such
Thank you
faith
very
in
much.
our democratic system, our self-government. I actually thought and believed that the story would be compelling enough to cause a real sea change in the way that Congress reacted to that issue. I thought they would be startled too, and they weren't.
The struggles, the victories that aren't really victories, the defeats that aren't really defeats, they can serve to magnify the significance of some trivial step forward, exaggerate the seeming importance of some massive setback. April 3rd, 1989. My son pulled loose from my hand and chased his friend across the street. He was 6 years old. The machine was breathing for him. We were possibly going to lose him. He finally took a breath. We stayed in the hospital for a month. It was almost as if you could look at that calendar and just go, and everything just flew off. It's trivial, insignificant. He was so brave. He was such a brave guy. Just turned my whole world upside down and then shook it until everything fell out. My way of being in the world, it just changed everything for me. How should I spend my time on this earth? I really dug in, trying to learn about it much more deeply. I went to Antarctica, went to the South Pole, the North Pole, the Amazon, went to places where scientists could help me understand parts of the issue that I didn't really understand in depth. The possibility of losing what was most precious to me. I gained an ability that maybe I didn't have before, but when I felt it, I felt that we could really lose it. That what we take for granted might not be here for our children.
These are actual measurements of atmospheric temperature since our Civil War. In any given year, it might look like it's going down, but the overall trend is extremely clear. And in recent years, it's uninterrupted and it is intensifying.
Great. So you definitely get that sense of the juxtaposition between the slideshow and then this kind of very slow, almost meditative personal narrative. And that river is a kind of an image that recurs, and that has to do with where he's from, where...
Yeah, the movie starts with a picture of that river, and it starts in this meditative place where he's like, you know, you look at this place, and you say, oh, you know, I forgot about this. Like, so I saw this I haven't watched this movie in 6 years, 7 years. And I just was picking a clip, and I'd forgotten about this. Because it's not my favorite part of the movie. But I thought it'd be interesting because how closely you can put him talking about the loss of his son to this idea of losing this planet. Mm-hmm. And I'd forgotten we even did that, but it's to me it's kind of the riddle that we sort of solved on Inconvenient Truth that continues in my other work, which is how do you connect the very internalized personal journey of a person with a larger issue. So we took that even further with Waiting for Superman. We can talk about that, but like to me, that's kind of something we stumbled on by necessity because we had this slideshow and we had to inject a personal story into it. And we started to realize that you can just do it in a pretty radicalized way that sort of is counterintuitive. It doesn't make sense that you shouldn't be able to do that. Put the almost death of his son with losing the planet. Like, it doesn't feel. But when he did it, I start to cry when I look at that. I get very emotional. Today, I was like, that's heavy.
Yeah. I mean, it is the power of the film, in a way, to make that kind of link.
Right.
Right? I mean, that's how we all end up identifying with whatever causes that we do. How difficult was it to to bring that out of Al Gore? Because I mean, it's interesting to think that he's someone who struggled with personifying himself in his campaigns, in his political campaigns.
It was really difficult.
Yeah.
I did at least 10 interviews with him, and I'd never used the first 6 or 7 or 8 because he was so familiar with the camera and was so used to presenting himself to the world and didn't talk like this. Just wasn't in his, he'd been taught to, you know, he was a good politician, and also I imagine if you're a candidate, you make a protective shell around you. Like, why would you want to share your most quiet thoughts? And so I was very frustrated and would, flying to Nashville and doing these long interviews and coming back and having very little to use, if nothing. Mm-hmm. And so I decided to do this really radical thing, which was to interview him without a camera and just do these audio interviews. So just me and him on a couch with no crew in the room. And first interview, we just 3 hours just talked. And everything changed. This is what it was. Like 80% of the movie is that first interview, just him and I talking. It's a different mode. It was just like amazing. And you don't care that he's not on camera. In fact, you kind of like that he's not on camera. The rest of the movie, he's on a chairlift. I mean, forklift. What is it? No, a scissor lift. You know, so.
I mean, in some ways, it's a similar kind of task that you had set before you in making the campaign films for Barack Obama. You know, right. Creating a character and developing a story and kind of creating an arc in that story. But how do these fit together? How does the work you're doing here fit with that work? And how do you characterize it? Yeah, like is it? Or do you think of your films as your documentaries? Is this activism? Is it advocacy? Is it about entertainment, education?
Wow. Yes.
Yes. No.
It's a weird combination of all those things, mm-hmm. but it's the ultimate question for me anyway. I think it's a weird way of answering. I think I'm a cynical hippie. So my parents were lefties, and the conversation I grew up in Washington, D.C., was about Bobby Kennedy and Martin Luther King, and a lot of the things that probably people here talk. But then you get disenchanted, and saw a lot of idealistic films kind of fall on their face and kind of ring untrue to my generation. So I think my relationship to the audience is different than my father's relationship to the audience. Mm-hmm. I think in my films you have to sort of address the most cynical part of people's thinking about an issue. Not with the campaign stuff. The campaign stuff is a different mode, but like with climate change, you have to say, yeah, I'm sick of partisan debates. I don't want to trash ExxonMobil. I want the facts. Like, I want to be proven that this is real. So that's one thing. And then I think the other thing for me is storytelling is the most important thing. That experience, your audience pays money to go to and sit in the theater. They want an experience. They want to be told a story. They don't want to be talked down to, and they don't want to be preached to. Mm-hmm. And they want, and it's okay to have a point of view. Like, I think for a long time, documentaries were like this or this. You know, if we're going to say this is bad, it's also good. You know, and I got sick of that as a viewer. So it's like, you're going to make a movie about climate change? Tell us what you think. Don't tell us what to feel, but tell us, you know. So my heart is in activism. I would love people to be moved in my movies to make change. But I don't dare tell people to act. Because I think you don't do that in a movie. I kind of want to move them to the point where they want to act, and then leave little breadcrumbs for them to go act. But you know, you might think Inconvenient Truth is a partisan film that has a very strong point of view about climate change, which it kind of is, but it never tells you what to do. It never says you're responsible for the carbon that's up in the air. It never says you should change that. Mm-hmm. It just says, here they are. Here are the facts. Here's a point of view. Step in. And that's a different relationship to the audience, to go back to your question, than what my father did.
Right. Well, I have some other questions, but I want to move us to Waiting for Superman, okay. Because I think that in terms of this sort of like partisanship and whether or not you're telling people what to do, I mean, you can set out and decide what the narrative is and how you're going to approach it, but ultimately how people receive it is going to have a huge impact on the work and what's understood, how it's understood. Right. So in Waiting for Superman, this was a film you made. No big topic, school reform. Right? One of the most unthought about topics in American politics. And yeah. And again, this was something you were approached to make the film.
Yeah.
Yeah. But this is a film where you actually, unlike An Inconvenient Truth, you actually narrate Waiting for Superman. And then it starts, I think, with you asking a young student. It's like a perfect image of education. You're asking a young student, you ask him, if you have 4 cookies and you eat 2, what percentage of the cookies have you eaten? Yeah. And then he kind of, right on camera, you watch him think. Right? He does like the cross multiplication. I'm like, oh yeah, I remember how to do that. And then he comes up with a solution, and then his face has this just, he's beaming because he figured it out. You know, I mean, he's obviously.
You ate 50% of your cookie.
Right.
Is what he says.
50%. Yeah. It's just perfect. I mean, it kind of captures the love of learning and, you know, what you want education to be and how you want young people to feel about it. But this was a film that generated a lot of really, I don't know if controversy is the right word. Just a lot of reaction. People had very strong reactions to this film.
Some people hated the movie.
Right.
And permission, as we talk about it, to talk candidly about it. I've got some questions of my own about the movie. So
yeah, so I want to talk about that. Okay. But so we're going to look at a scene from the film, which is about. It's a really interesting point, because I mean, in terms of films having an impact, I think of one of the things that Waiting for Superman did. I mean, people were talking about school reform and about privatization of schools or the rise of charter schools, and whether this was a solution to quote unquote our failing schools. Right. And looking at some of the key figures involved in that, Jeffrey Canada in New York, Michelle Rhee in DC, and then activists, teachers, the teachers union, and this is really about an argument about the teachers unions and their impact on the quality of education, the quality of teaching. So let's take a look at this scene.
And I chose the gnarliest part of this movie on purpose, so we can get into it.
Okay. So this is a kind of bit of this clip,
There's an evaluation process for all teachers. And an impediment to reform.
Oh, it just jumped.
I'm a superintendent. I'm assigning kids over to a school.
We're gonna look at
the day
the
I
latter
send them
half
over
of this?
there, I know they ain't gonna learn nothing, because ain't nobody learned anything over there in 20 years. You go into a school building, right? And you go into this classroom where this great learning is taking place. Then you walk right next door to death. Teachers used to pass me notes. Make sure you go to room 222. And the principal who would be taking me around, before I go into, okay, Howard, I want to tell you, this is one of my, what they call 280T. What that is a provision in the contract that provided what we call the dance of the lemons. And the dance of the lemons.
So when you have a system that's completely dysfunctional, you see good people do strange things. In Milwaukee, they call it the dance of the lemons. Here's how it works. Principals have their lemons. These are teachers who are chronically bad. They know it. The other teachers know it. The school knows it. But the union contract says you can't fire them. So at the end of the year, all the principals get together and they do the lemon dance. Fred gives Jack his lemons. Jack gives Sally his lemons. And Sally gives Greg her lemons. The lemon dance. Each principal hopes the teachers he's stuck with at the end of the dance are somehow better than the ones he's getting rid of. And that this year, he'll finally be able to take his lemons and make lemonade. Each state deals with this in a different way. In some states, it's pass the trash. Others, it's the turkey trot. In New York, they have something else. Tenured teachers awaiting disciplinary hearings on offenses ranging from excessive lateness to sexual abuse, along with those accused of incompetence, are sent to the reassignment center, or what the rest of the world calls the rubber room. These 600 teachers collect their full salaries and accumulate benefits for spending 7 hours a day reading or playing cards. They spend an average of 3 years in the rubber room. Their hearings last 8 times longer than the average criminal case. The cost to the state of New York, $100 million a year. And none of this deals with the larger pool of teachers who just aren't good at their job.
So this is an evaluation process.
So, I mean, just to talk a little bit about that, I mean, this is a film, so you kind of wrapped yourself around it in your narration. You know, you're drawing us through this, and then it's a film that gets interpreted as being terribly anti-teacher union. Did that come as a surprise to you, or were you expecting that kind of response?
If you're seeing me tense up and be uncomfortable, it's because I am. You know, it was a really difficult choice whether to put this in the movie. Because I'm a Democrat. I'm a member of a union. I believe in unions. And my first movie ever was about teachers, and I've made 2 other films about education. I'm sat next to a teacher on the plane the other day, and we were just talking all about teaching, and I was in heaven. But friends of mine who are principals and superintendents and teachers were saying, this is crazy. This impasse between management and teachers. And by the way, it's still going on, and Chicago has been through it, right? The question I have, and I don't have the answer to it, is whether putting it in the movie helped any. Did it just harden people's hearts? Did it make things, did it change? Or was it just sort of inflammatory and that's it, which is not what I wanted. I wanted to do some good.
Right.
And I, as you ask your questions tonight, I'd love to hear what you think.
Well, yeah, let's have people respond. So we welcome your questions.
We are going to open the floor to your questions. We ask that you keep your questions short and to the point, that they are questions, so we can get to as many of you as possible. We have 2 students with microphones in the back, and we'll bring a microphone over to you as you put your hand up. So we'll take questions now from the floor. We'll prioritize student questions if they exist first, and then we'll open it up to everyone else here. We'll come up here and take this question first. Yeah.
Hi, I'm a lawyer for film and music, and so I have a few questions. But the main one was, like, when you were in that rubber room or whatever they called it, did you get the signatures and the permission for those people to put them in this film?
I didn't shoot that. That was a film that was posted online. And so we got that by fair use.
That's not fair use, but okay, that's a good answer.
No, we used it. We got fair use for that.
Oh, was it like a news thing?
I think another filmmaker had posted it.
Really? Okay, because I'm surprised none of those people sued you. And then
it was actually straight down the line fair use.
Really? Okay. Then also, what do you shoot on? I assume you're shooting on video and your father was shooting on film, but what kind of camera do you use?
I use a lot of different cameras, but mostly digital. Sometimes I shoot film.
Oh, really? Okay.
Some of Inconvenient Truth was shot on film.
Okay, great, thanks.
Let's take some other questions here about any of the films, any of the topics. What questions you have? Yeah, hand in the back.
It's interesting you made the comment that you didn't make the type of films that your dad did not want to make negative films, and that when you have a 30-second spot, it's a lot easier to do the negative than the positive. And yet with this film, with Waiting for Superman and the clip that you showed, what you did was show something that, of course, it's going to grab people's attention because it's so negative. And how true is it? You talk about it as if it's going on, that it's a terrible problem, and it's going on all around the country. 600 teachers is what percentage of the teachers in New York State? I mean, but people don't have any clue about that because what you showed them, all they're going to go away from that is say, oh, God, we have a real problem. Teachers, aren't teaching. They're doing terrible, they're just not very good, and we have to get rid of the teachers.
Yeah, I mean, we're a little bit of at a disadvantage tonight because you're seeing, I picked this on purpose. What's interesting is that I actually did an examination of the content in the movie, and it's like 6-to-1 positive about what teachers do. This is the one, right? Right, and that's what got taken away. And there was part of the earlier clip that's not in here. Jonathan Alter, who's one of my favorite journalists, said this thing that it was like, to me, it was a pivot in the whole movie. He said, teachers are a treasure. They're a work of art. They are what our country is about. Their union is often an obstacle to that. And to understand this issue, you have to hold both ideas in your head. That's what he says. And I was like, good, I understand that now, because I believe in unions. And I thought that the audience could accept that nuanced piece or truth or opinion, and they didn't. Because I believe that teachers are a treasure, and I believe that there are many more good teachers than bad teachers, but that contract is in the way of real reform. I believe that too.
We'll take other questions here. We have a hand up here. As we're getting the microphone up, just as a quick follow-up, looking at the film now, what would you change about it if you were to re-edit, reshoot? What would you do differently in the telling of that story?
That's the question I have right now, is like, what would I do differently? Because in some respects, it was a disappointment, my experience on it. It got a lot of attention. In some areas, it inspired people. In other areas, it created a really interesting conversation. In other areas, it made people angry in ways that I did not want to happen. I did another movie 3 years later, about teachers following teachers, just about what it means to be a great teacher. And about a third of the schools I went into, they asked me to leave. You're not welcome here anymore. And a third of the schools said, we love you, you're amazing. Like, thank you for making Waiting for Superman. But it's interesting, so I'm not, maybe I should have toned down the union part. I don't know. I'm curious what you think.
Well, thank you so much for being here. My question is kind of on how you pick your own stories. And how you pick the stories that you're going to tell. And my question is, how does that process go through in looking at next projects? But then also, do you feel that there are stories that you really want to tell, but through your own style, you aren't the best person to do that?
That's a great question. I'll do the last one first. I don't like movies about people I hate. Like other people are, Michael Moore's great at that. No, he's talented. Sometimes I don't like what he does, sometimes I like what he does, but he liked to go after people. I thought Fair 9/11 was a genius movie. Genius. I like to make movies about people I love. So in the heart of Waiting for Superman are these 5 kids, and you know. So in choosing a story, I was approached to make that movie by Participant, which made Inconvenient Truth. I'll be quick. And I said, no, can't make it. It's too gnarly a subject, you can't do it. And then I read an editorial by Thomas Friedman about the lottery. So if you haven't seen the movie ends with these kids, and they want to go to this school, and if they win the lottery, they get to go, and if they lose the lottery, they don't get to go. To me, that was a metaphor for the whole thing. So when I got that, I realized I could make the movie. So choosing the movie is a combination of, do I love it, but also can it be told in an interesting way with a beginning, middle, and end.
We have a hand up here. Yeah. And one back there that we'll get to. Yeah.
How you doing?
Hi.
While discussing the inconvenient truth, you talked about the fact that you don't tell anybody how to feel, the breadcrumbs, telling the story. Why is it that in the part about the lemons, the dance of lemons, if you told your story, if you didn't tell people how to feel, if what you told was fact, no matter the percentage of the truth, but it is a part of the story, then why, as a documentarian, do you question yourself if you told the story the way you saw it? So at what point does the response to the story interfere with the stories that you tell?
That is the question. That's the question. Right. Yeah, I mean, I wish I had a thicker skin. I kind of want everyone to love the movie. And sometimes the truth is ugly. And I really didn't, you know. So that's the question. And I guess I'm a cynical hippie. Like the hippie part of me wants it to, I want people to become teachers. I want, when people see my movies, to be inspired enough to do something great. It's not enough to just tell a story. And I get addicted to that. Like I get people come up to me and say, I bought a Prius because it's all Inconvenient Truth. You know, my daughter's going to become a teacher because of Waiting for Superman. That's cool. So to me, it's not enough to just tell a story. I have to I want it to do some good. But sometimes that runs in the face of what you're saying.
We're going to run back here to Kevin.
Hi, thanks for coming. Inconvenient Truth, that was after the 2000 election. You made that film, right? If I were Al Gore, to this day, I would not have conceded that election.
Yeah.
Look what it led to.
Yeah.
And to wars and everything else. Did you get any read from him did you see anything, did he regret anything about the election? Did he express any feelings about it?
He said, you know, a lot of people said, why did you concede? He's like, the Supreme Court rules. He's like, the only next step is a coup. Yeah, I actually don't know how that. I agree. I mean, isn't it interesting? David and I were talking last night about, the 500 or so people in Florida. That election was decided, depending on how you look at it, by as few as 500 people. Or the people who voted for Nader just because it was cool. They never thought he was going to win, but they were making a statement, right? You're right, 2 wars later and all that. It blows your mind to think about it.
I'm going to hand the baton. Well, I'll take one question here, then I'll hand the baton back to Allison for a final question about Davis's forthcoming film. Yeah. Go ahead, please.
Okay. Perfect. Well, I just wanted to ask, because you said that it was about both her and her father, and I was wondering how
film about Malala. Yeah.
Yes. How are you going to interweave those? Because a lot of people are very familiar with Malala, and just, I don't know. I just wanted to hear more about it because I'm very excited for it to come.
So the next film is about Malala Yousufzai, and I'm very excited. I just finished it, and I'm doing the breadcrumbs thing right now, where the film is finished, and then the credits come up, and I'm saying, I'm starting to write what that is, which is, if you educate a girl, it changes her life. And it changes her village, and it changes her city. So I want to get people to not just be inspired by that story, but also turn it into action. Comes out, I think, September, October, Fox Searchlight. It'll play here in Chicago. Hopefully we'll come here for that. These are the 2 most remarkable people I've ever met in my entire life. People talk about heroes and courage and stuff. But they were killing people who were speaking out in their town. Like Malala's father, they thought they were going to shoot. They killed 2 of his friends, killed them for speaking out. And he keeps speaking out. And then he thinks, there's no one whose voice rings more clearly than my 14-year-old daughter. And she starts to speak out. And they shoot her. It's an unbelievable story. And they are the most lovely, good, righteous in the best way people. So I'm really proud of it. I think it could be really special.
We're really excited, and congratulations, because you just got the deal right out of Sundance with Foxlight. So
yeah, Fox Searchlight.
Yeah. I don't know, maybe just sort of thinking about some of the topics you've chosen, just quickly. Climate change. You made a film about immigration reform, and your desire to make movies about positive things and people you like, but some of these issues are so intractable. You look at where we are with immigration, when you wrote The Dream Is Now. Well, the dream didn't happen. Or, climate change. Right. We really haven't moved forward on those. And what does that mean for you as a filmmaker, wanting to kind of inspire people, have some kind of call to action in your films? What does it mean to look back and see that we haven't necessarily acted on these issues, as important and as inspiring as they are to talk about?
Well, I think I have to understand that films are just movies. They're just 90 minutes. And they have a potent potential to inspire and to sort of shake things up. But then the movie's over and people go home. And so a movie doesn't teach a kid, and a movie doesn't build a better solar panel. So I don't have an expectation that movies do more than they should. So I don't expect the movies to change the issue. I hope to change people. I hope people leave having watched movies and to think differently. I think that's more my job. I don't think I can. I think there's smarter people and people who do things who do the other part.
Well, Davis, I want to thank you so much for helping us think differently about a lot of issues and for this conversation tonight. And Allison, thank you so much for leading it.
Thank you. That was great. Thank you, guys.
Truly appreciate it. Thank you for your great questions. Also, tomorrow night, we will have a conversation with Peter Slevin, who is the author of the acclaimed new biography of Michelle Obama, about her life and lots of roots in this neighborhood and the south side of Chicago, more broadly speaking. That takes place at 6 o'clock. That's here, right, tomorrow night? Back here in this room. So we encourage you to join us if you don't have that on your calendar already. Thank you all so much for being here. Thank you so much for being a visiting fellow here at the IOP too, Davis. Have a great evening.